Welcome back everybody to another cigar and a thought video. We were just out here enjoying the rest of our cigar and we wanted to discuss a topic that we had on our minds, and so this is just going to be a very organic, free-flowing conversation, since I'm sure a lot of you will love this topic, and that is, has social media killed luxury? I suppose given my niche, it's luxury fashion, but it could be luxury of all types, right? It could be travel, it could be cigars even. My boyfriend is obviously here in the background smoking his own cigar, and we're just going to chat very freely about it. Let me just show you the Bosna that I have. This was a Churchill that we've actually smoked down, so apologies, it's not the full length, but I've done unboxings and things like that on my channel before, and on my Instagram as well. I frequently do impromptu reviews of cigars, so definitely go check those out. I guess when it comes to social media and luxury, back in the days when we grew up, we only really saw luxury when it came on billboards, TV commercials. It was quite out of reach, I would say. And when it comes to fast forward nowadays, everything is much more accessible, everything's more global. And we're now at a stage where you can go on Instagram, and provided you have been watching those kinds of videos and consuming that kind of content, you will be fed constant images and videos of people buying luxury handbags and people with nice watches, fancy cars, all of that. And it seems very attainable. It seems like everybody has it. Either one, you go and chase that never-ending high, versus the other extreme whereby it feels almost fake. Now I'm getting overstimulated and there's just too much content when it comes to luxury. And certainly for me as a creator, you're always feeling pressure to buy the latest thing or to do something sensationalist, right? To get clicks or more engagement or whatnot. As a business person, that seems savvy. But then it comes to a point that it's actually just too much. You could argue even some items are probably fake, people are just doing things for clout. And actually some luxury brands, your Chanel, your Hermèses, that were once very, desirable, hard to come by, you're seeing people buying Hermès bags potentially almost every other day because the algorithm feeds it to you. So it seems less special. What's your perspectives on that?
I think firstly, it's like with all things, social media has normalized things that are excessive. And that is pretty much through, as you said, constant exposure nowadays, because you have your phone, which you have access to Instagram and whatnot 24/7. And if you like that sort of stuff, the algorithm feeds it to you constantly. It's definitely normalized it, and this applies to any niche as well. For me, my luxury vice is luxury cars. I remembered when I was little, whenever I saw an Italian supercar or a supercar in general, it wowed me. But these days, it's a case of, it's like kind of seeing it on social media. And I think the second thing for me, it's democratized luxury a lot. There is a process and a game to play to getting an Hermès bag, which, I think back in the days in the 90s or the early noughties before social media, it was probably esoteric. But nowadays, with social media, you have creators that say, oh, this is the process, this is how you get it. So, it's definitely made it more accessible.
That is very true, actually. There was, I feel, once an air of mystery around brands like Hermès, and obviously the success of their brand, ironically, despite the popularity of unboxing videos and how-to videos of how to play the game, they still managed to retain this quite desirable brand image. They won't tell you how much you have to actually spend to unlock the offers for bags, right? When it comes to social media, that actually hasn't really deterred people as much, I feel. But I think for brands that haven't curated that image, after one video, two videos, you're like, oh, well, that's how every purchase goes down. So actually, this is pretty boring. You really then have to go to your Hermèses, even your fine jewelry, your other super niche brands perhaps, that you're going to get a shopper's high. It's a double-edged sword for brands when it comes to social media, because yes, some of them want the exposure, free UGC, so user-generated content. You have to pay for billboards anymore. You can get people who will do the shilling for you actually, because they just want to be seen with your brand. But then on the other hand, if your brand is exposed too much, you lose that air of mystery. I think that's what Hermès has desperately clung on to, and they've done relatively well up until the recent lawsuit, of course. You're seeing like Gucci and Bottega and whatnot. It's quite common to see people with those bags. You know, back in the days, there wasn't so much thing as Klarna or Afterpay. Nowadays, you've got social media plus available credit. You have no idea if what people are showing you are actual unboxings. They could be luxury shoppers, personal shoppers, or they bought something as a gift. And also, you have no idea if the items that they have are even authentic. Whereas in the past, these things were very hard to come by. So if you saw someone with an Hermès bag, or if someone told you they bought something, it's likely to be real. Though even as I think out loud, with supercars, people can hire them, they can lease them.
Brands that rely on that air of mystery, I think the landscape's completely changed. There's just no real mystery, inverted commas, anymore with social media. But maybe in the past, in the 90s or noughties, everyone probably thought the Hermès selection process was random, you know, get in the queue per se for a Hermès Kelly bag. But now we don't know the process exactly, but it's something along the lines of you will have to spend X amount. And actually, I think if you look on social media and if you look on the internet hard enough, you'd be able to sort of aggregate a range. I feel like with cars, anyone with the means, etc., can buy it, right? I mean, you know, if you have, you know, Lamborghini is not going to turn someone down and say, oh, you know, you're gonna have to wait and whatnot. If you've got $250,000 to buy a Lamborghini, they'll give it to you, right? But I think what I've found with Hermès is even if you have the money, if you have the means, that it's a case of, nope, we can't sell it to you. Get in line, right? And I get it, right? You know, the margins on making a Lamborghini and selling it are really thin. Whereas I think to make an Hermès, I don't know, Hermès Birkin will probably cost a couple of hundred, and they'll sell it for a couple of thousands, which, you know, they can afford to be picky.
Just as a follow-on thought around the margins that these brands like Hermès make. So obviously recently, for those in the luxury community, you'll be quite aware of the Dior Scandal. There was basically an investigation and some sort of raid on one of their factories they outsourced to a third party. And essentially, they found the workers were in really poor condition. They came to the conclusion that this book tote was $3,000 to $4,000 to sell, you know, at retail, but it was made for around $60. You're then seeing on the other side where actually brands probably don't appreciate all of what social media has to offer, because while some people are actively shilling your item and your brand for free with unboxings and things just to be seen, maybe for the clout, to keep up with the Joneses, or because they just love the item. On the other hand, for those when it comes to a disgruntled experience or some sort of expose, right, bad quality, when it comes to potentially ethics, sustainability, it can be quite damaging to a brand. And there's no way of having a PR spin when everybody has a phone and everybody can post. Because of the selective nature and the high ticket nature of supercars, you're not really going to get that, because so few people are going to be offered the opportunity and have the capacity to buy a Ferrari, Lamborghini, compared to it's still what? $6,000-$7,000 for an Hermès handbag or a Chanel handbag, but that's much easier to buy than several $100,000 of a car. You're probably not going to buy that many of them unless you're in the super rich. You might buy one in your life and then you'll probably trade that in for another, right? Whereas with Hermès handbags, you are seeing lots of creators buying one after another after another. At some point, someone might have a bad experience, someone has a quality issue, someone has a complaint generally, and that social media messaging can amplify and actually kill a brand. That's kind of happened with actually Van Cleef Arpels recently, Dior that we've mentioned, many others, right? And so that's where I think social media may have killed luxury because of its accessibility, but also its bad publicity potentially for brands. And you can't control that. Whereas on a billboard, if someone messed up on the billboard, you just take that billboard down and there's no digital footprint on that one. For me as a consumer, so obviously with time and age and experience, and my collection is very vast, so I naturally tapered down. But I think getting that overexposure and seeing so much bad press, it puts a taste in your mouth actually.
With social media, there's less opportunity to control the narrative. In the 90s and the noughties, when you've got billboards and TV adverts where there's probably many iterations and it's professionally worked on, you can control the narrative, and even if something bad comes out, because the only way that people would have access to that bad news is through the TV with a PR person or spin, whereas with social media, you know, there's so many internet sleuths, and people are consuming content left, right and center. I think even if there is a PR person from Hermès trying to put out the fire, there will still be a lot of internet sleuths doing digging and digging and digging. People are seeing the truth, right? And I think it's really interesting that you mentioned Van Cleef and Cartier, because jewelry and diamonds, it's a completely other topic, right, of how social media and even media in general have kind of revealed the, you know, true intrinsic value of diamonds per se.
And this actually follows on very nicely to another thought that I had. Costume jewelry, handbags, accessories, those are all low-hanging fruit, as it were, for luxury lovers. So now people are pivoting towards price on request items. So we're talking like fine jewelry or super limited edition, bedazzled, or maybe even exotic skinned handbags, accessories, ready to wear, etc. But actually with those brands, Van Cleef in particular, there was a recent scandal about, I think it was like a gold-plated, one of their Alhambra bracelets. It's like a clover design, and an influencer basically saw it tarnished super quickly, barely even worn it. She had a really poor experience, and that was a bracelet, I think, that was like almost $10,000. Look, I genuinely think there is a big proportion of the luxury consuming community that buys it just for the love of it, but I think in the younger audience there is that pressure to keep up. Maybe people don't even care about the quality. It's actually, most people are just preoccupied with the brand. I think based on the fact that people are always finding a new area of luxury, there will never be a scenario in the world, even regardless of wealth gap and inflation and whatnot, where people will not buy luxury. They'll just buy something different, and people will always be racing to get to the next point. And I made a video about it in it was like a psychological study. It was an educational study. It was super interesting. I would highly recommend pursuing that video, obviously, where it's, you know, the bandwagon effect. People want to fit in, or even perhaps they want to be a first mover and they want to stand out and lead the crowd. And that's where you're seeing a lot of people buying this $10,000 necklace or bracelet from Van Cleef. There was suddenly an explosion, and for me personally, I was like, when it's too popular, I don't want it, but other people do want it. And when you're a luxury creator, you do feel a bit of pressure, I think, to buy the next thing, because ultimately, even if people hate it and it's controversial, it gets the views and it gets the engagement. It's provocative, it gets the people going. And there will never be a scenario, at least for me, where I think that even with the downfalls of social media, that luxury will ever cease to exist. What's your say on that?
I don't think luxury will ever die, because it really does boil down to the question of, why do people buy luxury? One, it's a material validation of your worth, inverted commas, and two, it's a sign of prestige, right? You don't spend 4 figures, even 5 figures on a bag if you're just looking for something to carry your stuff. You do not need to spend that much on that. You know, I rewind back to a lot of trips to our favorite luxury stores, where you show me a bag and tell me the cost, and I'm sort of gobsmacked by not only the cost but also the size of them, right? And I say, realistically, what can that really contain? And I think the only luxury bag that I thought straddled a really good mix of utilitarian but also at a good value was the Chanel bag you bought from Japan.
For those that are unaware, he's referring to the Chanel tote bag unboxing on my channel, in case you want to see that. But yeah, it's a big bag. It's not like you're paying per square meter of leather, right? Let's be honest. Also, for me, I genuinely like the design. I know some people will be like, yeah, I like the design. No, I genuinely like Chanel bags. I like their aesthetic. I personally love my collection, but to your point, any tote bag will do. Even a jute bag from IKEA will do. But there is inherently, I think, it's not worth denying it, because there must be some element of, it's a milestone, it's, you know, prestigious, it's, yeah, a brand that you like, but it carries some weighting, and for some people it will be a source of validation or achievement.
That is inherently within every single human being. luxury and buying a high value item that people know the value of will not die. Social media has democratized it because a lot of people know the worth of a Kelly Birkin bag and also know what it looks like. I know as well, and I'm not even in luxury. Every time I see one, I say to myself, wow, okay, that person not only had the means financially to afford it, but also I know the game that needed to be played. Metaphorical pat on the back for that person, I guess.
That's a really good point. I think there are a few head pats that people will naturally expect, or people will do for other people that they see that have acquired these items because they're so difficult and they're so expensive. And for me, I respect the hustle, especially if you bought the bag yourself. As a woman, I always think, get your own bag, don't wait for someone else to give you one. And I do personally think out of all this, yes, some people might turn those up at luxury, each to their own. But I respect the hustle and I respect the pure grit that you had to go through to get this bag. Would I put myself through that? Absolutely not. But I do think social media and seeing people successfully get those items gives people that sense of, I can do it too if I work hard enough. And I think in an aspirational way, that's quite good. But what I think in terms of my final thoughts as well is, to an extent, social media is good at motivating until it becomes jealousy or it becomes fatiguing, too much, it becomes fake, it makes you like something that actually you probably wouldn't have liked if you didn't see it so much. I genuinely think there is some sort of subconscious mind game propaganda of it all, because I personally think the Hermès, Birkin and Kelly are not the best looking. Some people even get gifted handbags, which is a whole other topic in itself, that creates this artificial demand. I think you just got to be a discerning customer. You just got to understand what social media is doing. If you don't want to see that content, don't consume it, or just limit your screen time and just recognize that you don't know the context or what someone had to do to get an item. They could be in a lot of debt. They could have got gifted it or borrowed it from somebody. It could even be fake, and they'll probably sell that item later on. There's so many creators that I've seen that unbox a beautiful bag, then months later they say they've sold it. So don't be one of those people that buys into stuff, luxury handbags, fashion or otherwise, just because social media tells you that, because that's not something that you authentically like, and ultimately it's costly and you'll just move on to the next thing. Luxury will not die, it will just change form, especially for those that are in the super rich, because I think this is something that mainly affects lower to middle class income people.
They're the biggest market.
They are the biggest market, yeah.
For luxury.
Yeah, and not to say the super rich don't like it, because they definitely do. Cue Mark Zuckerberg's $500 t-shirts, but they don't shout about it. And I think that's ultimately where I found I enjoy my luxury the most. Will I ever stop buying luxury at this moment in time? No, I've slowed down dramatically. I want to say like 70 to 80%. And I'm really happy because I pursue other things, experiences mostly. But there will always be something that I'm sure I will like, and I'm not going to pretend and sit here that the luxury is beneath me or whatnot, because I will only buy things that I like, not because social media dictates it. So any final words before we sign off?
Going back to the core question, will social media kill luxury? I think the answer is no. As you said, some people will get jealous of it and whatnot, and some people will find it motivating. I think at the end of the day, social media is an external stimulus to everyone. It's just there. And I think how you process content, and in this case, luxury content, is kind of an interesting reflection on you as a person, right? If you're jealous of it, what does that say about you? There's a lot of flack for it, but again, it's, you have to question, why do you feel jealous of it? Why do you feel so much disdain for seeing luxury? Whereas on the other hand, there are some people who see that and see that as aspirational, and it really will motivate them to get themselves off their arse per se, and work harder.
So moral of the story, don't do things for the validation of others, and limit your screen time, because I think we can all say with confidence that we're going to be all better off touching grass than touching our black mirrors. I will leave this video right here. Yeah, exactly. We're going to finish our stogies. This is a lovely light to medium bodied Bosner, actually. It's getting a little bit more deep, fuller bodied as we end. But hopefully you've been smoking along or enjoying this conversation. Please let us know down in the comments below what your thoughts are on this topic. Do you think social media has killed luxury? And if you want to see my boyfriend formally come on the channel because he is a bit camera shy, then we can all healthily peer pressure him down in the comments. So anyways, thank you as always for watching, and I'll catch you in my next one.